Sorry for a slight delay on our site. We had a bit of technical issues given the number of speakers. My name is Anna Zamys. I'm a political analyst originally from Poland, living in the Czech Republic. And it's my pleasure to moderate this panel on behalf of the Norwegian Helsinki Committee and also a Justice for Journalists Foundation. We're going to have with us actually as many as 6 speakers. Well, 7 with Barrett, so that's a big number. So I would kindly ask our panelists to be brief with the comments. You're going to start with around 5-minute speech each. Then we'll have 2 interventions from the audience, and then we will hopefully, within this 1 hour, proceed to the questions and answers from the audience. And one technical remark: this event is live streamed on Facebook. By the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, so you can also later share it and watch it. However, it will be only live streamed, the main part. So we'll have only the main part, the main speeches will be live streamed, and then for the security of the question and answer sessions, for the participants to feel okay and safe to ask questions, we're going to switch off recording for your knowledge. So, without further ado, perhaps we can start. I will not, in order to save time, I will not be introducing the topic, will not have any speech to start with. I will just tell you we're going to cover the issue of political imprisonment across several participating states. We'll go one by one. Unfortunately, it's a recurring theme at each HDIM or Warsaw Human Dimension Conference. There's space here if you want. It's a recurring theme. I wish that one day we will not have to talk about it that much, and I guess it's also increasingly relevant, and your presence on Friday afternoon actually speaks to the importance of the topic. So let's start from Nino Plashathe, human rights defender from Georgia, who's sitting on my left. Nino, Georgia has been through a very fast changing environment recently. I mean, Georgia has experienced the fastest democratic backsliding in the region, much faster than we have seen in the past when it comes to other countries. So can you give us the general overview? What is the situation of political prisoners in Georgia? What trends you see these days, and whether there's any light at the end of this demo? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, indeed, unfortunately, I have to agree that years ago nobody believed that my colleagues, we will have to speak about political prisoners in Georgia. But unfortunately, this is the reality now in our country, to our greatest sorrow and surprise, and to the surprise and sorrow of our dear partners. In recent years, the anti-democratic steps taken by the Georgian Dream government have increasingly restricted freedom of expression and right to peaceful assembly in the country. As the Georgian legislation becomes more tailored to the needs and interests of the party, any form of criticism may become punishable now. Despite numerous critical assessments from international human rights organizations and institutions about human rights, black side in Georgia, the Georgian Dream continues to persecute dissenting and critically minded citizens by political justice. Already around more than 100 citizens of Georgia remain illegally imprisoned to date, including Ziama Vobeli, founder of the newspaper Batumelebi and Gazeti, whose criminal case is a clear example of politically motivated justice. The evidence presented by the prosecution in her case doesn't meet any standards for criminal charges. Ziama Vobeli was initially arbitrarily detained for putting up the protest ticket in Batumi, but then she was released under personal guarantee, but soon she was again detained, under the criminal charges for allegedly assaulting the head of the police in Batumi, Irakli Klebuadze. In fact, she just touched his face with open hand. Following the criminal detention, Ziama Globeli was subjected to inappropriate treatment by Gerwadze in the building and in the year there was a police office. Inside the station, Gerwadze even tried to physically confront him, but other police officers somehow restrained him. In the police room, he's patting Ziama Globeli's face. For some time, this journalist lady, she could not get, she was refused to drink water, to get medical support, and even contact her lawyer. Her health has significantly deteriorated, and her vision has significantly worsened. She cannot see properly now. Another lady, woman who we have in prison, politically imprisoned, is a civil activist and teacher, Nino Datashvili, who is accused for assaulting a court security officer in the corridor of the Tbilisi City Court. In June, judge imposed pretrial detention to her, and her health conditions are also very much worsened, like Ziama Globeli. She cannot move now, and she cannot attend and go to the court rooms. According to the criteria established by the Council of Europe on political prisoners, today already we have more than 100 political prisoners. Among them are 13 political opposition leaders. If we evaluate the number of prisoners in Georgia per capita, we have more political prisoners now in Georgia than Putin has in Russia. Since October 4, 45 persons were already arrested, including 70-year-old doctor, pediatrician. Alongside other mechanisms of repression, criminal justice mechanisms have been actively used against demonstrators and civil activists. Most criminal charges were brought against detained activists, like organizing or participating in group violence. It is noteworthy that in all cases the court satisfied the prosecution's motion to use detention without taking into account individual circumstances such as defenders' personal characteristics, their health conditions, age, occupation, family or financial status. We have among prisoners poets, students, doctors, actors, teachers, journalists, individuals under age of 21, people from socially vulnerable families, even the sole breadwinners or caregivers of their family members who had health problems, and the mother of one of these political prisoners even died because nobody could take care. The majority had no prior criminal convictions and had never even been administratively fined before this persecution, but it was not taken into consideration by the prosecutors. In parallel to the above-mentioned politically motivated justice, to date, not a single administrative offense or criminal case was initiated against any police officer, supporter of the ruling political power, or representative of law enforcement agencies for violence and harassment, for the torture of protest participants, for using obscene language or personal insults or threats in public spaces against the civil activists, political opponents of the Georgian dream. Unfortunately, this is the reality now in our country, and nobody could believe, but now we live in similar reality.
Thank you, Nino. Thank you, Nino, for this brief overview, for keeping the time as well. I know we could talk about it for hours, and we just attended another side event that was dedicated to Georgia, where actually 1 hour was hardly enough to describe what is happening. Now we're going to go to Azerbaijan, and Samat Rahimli, a human rights lawyer, who is actually also living in exile. And Samat, my question to you is, actually, in the case of Azerbaijan, it's not the first time we see such a major deterioration of the situation. 10 years ago, many top leaders of civil society were put behind bars. The sector got literally decimated. But 2 or 3 years later, most of them got actually released. How is this crackdown different from what we observed in 2014? And similar question to Nino, do you see any hope actually for change, or perhaps we will not be able to get out of this grim situation?
Thank you very much. Regarding this question, the first question I believe is about the logic of crackdown, why autocratic regime in Azerbaijan initiated this crackdown. Previous crackdown, 2014 crackdown, it's okay? Okay. 2014 crackdown was about pursued two aims. First, it was short-term or mid-term prevention, especially especially in the context of events of Ukrainian Maidan protests. And second aim pursued under this crackdown was about retaliation against some top leaders of civil society, of some groups. But this time, the ongoing crackdown in Azerbaijan pursue again two aims. First aim right now is about total elimination of critical civil space in Azerbaijan. And second aim is related to first aim, and it's about long-term prevention, not short or mid-term prevention. So right now, mainly we talk about around 400 people arrested for with political motivated criminal cases in Azerbaijan, and around 60 or 80 of them belongs to pro-democracy movement in Azerbaijan, which includes politicians, critical media, and independent civil society organizations. So right now, Azerbaijan government under rule of Ilham Aliyev wants to totally eliminate and eradicate these forces for a longer period from Azerbaijani public space. So it's not all about the number of political prisoners who kept behind bars this crackdown. It's about what kind of activities lost, which pursued or continued in Azerbaijan inside in the field. We lost human rights monitoring. We lost critical media, any kind of. We lost all the alternative public space, which freedom of expression and critical voices actually expressed. We lost totally all of them. Right now we have nothing. There is nothing left in Azerbaijan. So it's not all about individual names. It's about totally get rid of civil space in Azerbaijan. So impact of this crackdown is actually very challenging for us. So for details, we could talk about many cases in Azerbaijan, which already some of you have information. I don't want to get details on these cases, but how to prevent? How can we prevent political imprisonment employed by autocratic regimes, or how to prevent machinery of repression in countries like Azerbaijan? That's a main question, and we should think about practical implications of our, let's say, discussions or engagement. So I believe it's important to get the point, how can we hurt them? Without any intervention, without any international intervention, it would take so much time for something to change in Azerbaijan based on objective or subjective, let's say, historical reasons like economic crisis and so on. But international protection mechanism or international human rights mechanism, which right now is under also attack in global space, could prevent if some mechanisms which we are talking about could be applied in the right way. It's important to understand that Azerbaijani government, it's important to find, let's say, which kind of weakness Azerbaijani government have. And weakness of Azerbaijani government is about their access to the financial system and their access to the European jurisdictions and European soil. So on individual level, we need targeted sanctions it's the only way that the important part of Azerbaijani machinery of repression be afraid. Like any kind of targeted individual sanctions against high-level officials of Azerbaijan, especially who oversee law enforcement bodies. It would have very helpful impact. And second, it's about Azerbaijani financial standing. So we should think about how let's say international financial organization ways how to include some mechanisms on international financial mechanisms and norms that human rights dimension also will also be taken into account when these international financial mechanisms engage vis-a-vis Azerbaijani authorities. So it's very important. For example, if the Azerbaijani government pass legislation on restricting angel legal personnel, then it's important to get some kind of let's say some kind of norms included to rule of law checking system on like some kind of credit or warrant systems that if you pass the laws restricting non-commercial activities, it also could affect your financial standing, your credit rates. So that's one aspect. And second is about how to include, let's say, norms against political imprisonment on this financial or international business fora that could affect Azerbaijani access to this place. Not Azerbaijan, but other states also. So finding weakness and hurting on this weakness could be a counterbalance machinery of repression. That's all the hope currently I could see in these circumstances.
Right. Thank you so much. In the past, by the way, we used to have side events where we would put like an empty chair for a political prisoner, for someone who is currently in jail, who used to attend the Warsaw Human Dimension Conference. But now there would need to be so many of these empty chairs, unfortunately, that we wouldn't have enough rooms actually to put them in, sadly. But let's go now to Turkey. And we have the next speaker, Barış Altıntaş, who is a human rights lawyer. Barış, unlike in Azerbaijan, civic space still exists in Turkey. However, it doesn't mean that Turkey doesn't have a problem of political persecution of activists. Can you tell us what is the scale of the issue right now? What are the trends and what laws are currently used against journalists and human rights defenders?
Thank you very much. First, thanks for this opportunity. Firstly, I'm not a lawyer. I just wanted to. I'm the co-director of an organization in Turkey called Media and Law Studies Association that gives legal support to journalists. So we have a big legal unit, but I'm a journalist. So I just wanted to correct that. And I also want to add that yes, I'll be talking a little bit on legislation and. Of course, the situation, listening to what's going on in other countries is very similar. I always say that at every panel, I read with my colleagues, and there's increasing pressure on every segment of civil society. But I'm going to focus a little bit more on journalists because we represent mostly journalists. We have 230 clients, and the majority of them are journalists. But we also have a very extensive trial monitoring program, actually, which was inspired by ODIHR and is based on OSCE standards. So while we do our job, a big part of our job is gathering all the statistics and the trends that that there are. So in a nutshell, Turkey's democratic backslide has been going on more slowly than in Georgia, and things started getting really worse, as you all know, probably after 2013 when there was a Gezi protest and there was a coup attempt in 2016. And in 2017, Turkey went onto a presidential system, an executive presidency, and then this basically ended up in a very big erosion of the judiciary. And I think that is the bane of most journalists. And so Turkey's press laws weren't great, but they weren't too bad. But we're seeing now like, a lot of abuses of the existing legislation. So for example, in the past judicial year, we observed about 600 hearings from more than 300 cases where 315 journalists were in prison. And this is consistent within the case that over the past 2 or 3 years, of course, Turkey's anti-terror legislation has been used against journalists and also now increasingly against students, starting March 2019 with the jailing of the opposition and also against other segments of society. So, for example, as a journalist, you can be charged with and even actual jail time for writing a report on the judiciary and be charged of making terror propaganda, membership of terror organization, and we're saying more than 70% of journalist trials like this, and the evidence will only be the photos you took or your articles and whatnot. And then we're also seeing now like quote-unquote lesser crimes being used against journalists, and one was of course the disinformation law. Turkey was rather late in comparison with other countries adopting this. They adopted it in late 2022, and within the first year, about 40 journalists were actually somehow either investigated or actually tried over that. And for example, I just want to give this one example. The first case was Sinan Aygün, and he was our client, and he was in this, and he was basically, he actually stayed in prison for a week over this law, and he reported, he's from Bitlis, and now he's actually also in Switzerland, I think. He was investigated for reporting on the sexual assault of a minor by a local figure. So it was actually like a really good report. And in addition to this, now we're seeing it used a lot against, obviously, reporters that where we know the news reporter does not constitute disinformation in any way, and there have been, I will give you just one example to illustrate it. Of course, it's not used for disinformation, we know this, but for example, a journalist was tried for reporting that during the February earthquakes of 2023 in Turkey, there was a prison riot in Elazığ, and he was tried under this, and then the court during the trial asked the gendarmerie in Elazığ if this was true, and then they were like, yes, there was a riot at the time, and this was disinformation. So and he was acquitted. And the acquittal rates in Turkey remain very high, but that's a different topic, and I think there's a reason for that. And I know I'm coming to the end of my period, but I'm just going to wrap up. I was going to give other examples, but I think we can do this in the question and answer session. In addition to terror legislation being used, there's also obviously defamation and false cases against journalists and others. I just want to note that this year, in terms of political prisoners, of course, we have hundreds of Kurdish politicians in prison, and now starting in March, hundreds of CHP, this main opposition CHP party in prison, starting in March, and we have seen a growing crackdown on the LGBTI, which has also, Turkey is a bit late comer in that as well. So they've been, talking negatively about LGBTI for the past 2 years, and for the past 2 years, our LGBTI associations have been getting all these audits and whatnot. And this year, as was announced, the family here in Turkey, and we're seeing a lot of these increasing cases against singers or dancers for violating family values and not. So it's just in addition to the journalism trials. I know I'm well over time. I just wanted to add these, but we're using the similar legislation used all against them, and where the terror crimes can't be used, then there's these lesser crimes to keep people in prison, basically.
Thank you, Barış. You were actually not over time. I didn't want to stress you. You were actually precisely on time. And now we will travel all the way to Central Asia. We have translators, interpreters who are in the booth. So the next speaker from Kazakhstan is Bakhtijan Toregorgina, human rights defender, who is going to speak Russian. So in case you need the headphones, you can grab them right now. This is the time. So Bakhtijan, could you talk to us about the main trends when it comes to political imprisonment in Kazakhstan? who are actually the activists right now persecuted in Kazakhstan, and how bad is the situation when you compare to other countries in the region?
Спасибо, Анна. Я буду говорить по-русски. Ну, я могу сказать, что я занимаюсь мониторингом прав политических преследований и политических заключенных с 2011 года, когда произошли события в Жанаузене. И с этого момента, в течение 15 лет, я могу сказать, что ситуация, как сейчас, никогда не была так плохо. Это связано с тем, я считаю, что в 2022 году, когда произошли у нас январские события, и было расстреляно 238 человек, и никто фактически не понес наказание, и эта безнаказанность, несправедливость, буквально безответственность со стороны государства очень сильно сказалась на структуре государственной власти. У нас прекратили исполнять закон. У нас прекратили создавать видимость правового государства. Хотя господин Токаев говорит о том, что в стране должен быть закон и порядок, но он почему-то при этом не упоминает, что его непосредственные приказы, указы не исполняются. Либо исполняются так, что фактически можно это отнести к тому, что они игнорируются. И вот эта ситуация, она идет сверху донизу. И это, конечно, мы видим именно в первую очередь в нарушении прав человека, когда граждане хотят реализовать право на свободу слова, пишут свое мнение в интернете, либо хотят организовать митинг, или хотят организовать какое-то общественное объединение. И мы видим, что здесь идет полное игнорирование, и причем, когда есть ранее, у нас есть огромный опыт общения с государственными органами, они реагировали, пытались исправлять ситуацию. Критика на международном уровне для них была чувствительной, то сейчас мы видим полное игнорирование и пофигизм. Даже вы, наверное, заметили, что делегация Казахстана здесь я фактически не видела ни одного государственного чиновника, которые ранее сюда приезжали. Даже господин Мустаев не приехал. И это говорит о том, что даже международные площадки для них уже не имеют никакого значения. Понятно, что у нас сейчас тотальная слежка за гражданами в интернете, это само собой разумеющееся, но сейчас у нас буквально прослушки, слежки устанавливают за инакомыслием. Люди собираются в кафе, в такой частой обстановке, обсудить, а потом на них заводят уголовные дела, значит, и судят на немаленькие сроки. И причем, когда мы в суде пытаемся значит, доказать, откуда есть ли вообще санкция на прослушивание людей, особенно в частных вечеринках, да, нам говорят, что есть секретный свидетель, с которым даже не может познакомиться с показаниями адвоката. Уже не говоря о том, что о самих подозреваемых, обвиняемых, да. И вот это беспредел, знаете, полная безнадежность, она настолько сказывается на обществе, что сейчас мы сталкиваемся с тем, что мы даже не знаем дальше, куда двигаться. И причем это все понятно, что еще такие вот у нас есть дело трактористов, у нас дело есть противников атомной электростанции. Это буквально люди, которые впервые видят друг друга, встретились и обсудили, и на следующий день их всех арестовали. Вот иногда бывает, что людей задерживают, и они знакомятся друг с другом на решетке в суде, хотя они все проходят по одному уголовному делу. И такая тотальная слежка, которая, мы знаем, что наш господин президент очень дружит с Китаем, и, к сожалению, он один раз съездил туда и привел все наши территорию на один часовой поезд, да, и это оправдывает тем, да, что это якобы удобно, а на самом деле, когда люди начали возмущаться против единого часового поезда, это тоже послужило основанием для преследования активных граждан. Что самое, конечно, печальное, и ситуация ухудшилась именно в местах лишения свободы. Если как-то именно гуманное отношение в местах лишения свободы, она, как правило, показывает, насколько государство ответственно. Сейчас я могу констатировать, что идет, знаете, вопиющее нарушение прав осужденных. Значит, буквально там создают условия невыносимые. Вплоть до того, что там есть крысы, мыши, буквально антисанитарные условия. И когда один из наших лидеров оппозиции, Марат Жуанбаев, жалуется на такие условия, и мы, когда требуем уголовную исполнительную систему отвечать на вопросы, они полностью это игнорируют. И причем даже прокуратура после неоднократных наших обращений, когда делают проверку и выписывают предписание исправить, все равно уголовная исполнительная система этого не делает. Теперь с теми, кто уже отсидел достаточный срок и имеет право на условно-досрочное освобождение, их тоже не отпускают. Если раньше, допустим, было какие-то обращения, допустим, депутатов Европарламента, либо, значит, Конгресса США, то это было, знаете, каким-то лакмусовой бумажкой для нашего президента, и людей освобождали, то сейчас просто перед тем, как подходит срок условно-досрочного освобождения, обязательно будет провокация, и человека просто не отпускают. То есть ситуация сегодня в Казахстане настолько, знаете, просто какая-то безысходная. Причем мы не знаем, куда писать, куда обращаться и какие, допустим, рычаги использовать для того, чтобы эта ситуация немножко улучшилась. Поэтому я могу сказать, что вот я сейчас слушаю своих коллег, да, наверное, это такой общий тренд, да, общий тренд, и ну, наверное, нам, наверное, не надо как-то расстраиваться, либо все равно надо быть оптимистами, да, но ситуация в Казахстане, к сожалению, вот сейчас такая. Спасибо.
Спасибо. Большое. Our next speaker, we're going to switch back to English, is Ruslan Miatiev, who is a journalist and human rights defender from Turkmenistan. So we stay in Central Asia, and Turkmenistan is an example, or I would say the greenest example, perhaps among the countries when it comes to authoritarian systems. Well, I was looking at the ranking of political and civil freedoms, freedom in the world by Freedom House, and Turkmenistan got 1 point out of 100, 1. Before it was 2, so the question is how did it get from 2 to 1, and basically how you as a person in exile can monitor what's going on in such a closed environment in Turkmenistan. So can you give us a little bit of overview?
Sure. Thank you very much. Hello everybody. I didn't actually even know that we were on 2. Surprise.
2 years ago, yeah.
In March 2022, this young gentleman replaced this older gentleman. Son replaced his father in the seat of Turkmenistan's president, and while some people thought that, you know, he's a young man, Western educated, would ease the ruling grip in Turkmenistan, but unfortunately those hopes did not come true. In fact, in some of the aspects, the situation has gotten even worse. I can give you an example of Turkmen security services trying to extend their hand overseas to try to silence the critics of the Turkmen regime based abroad. And my colleague said that Turkey faces democratic backslide, and that is felt in Turkmenistan too. I can give you an example. In the past few years, at least 5 people, 5 civil activists, were forcibly extradited from Turkey to Turkmenistan. We don't know about their fates, what happened to them, and I will name all of them: Roshen Klichev, Merdan Samedov, Farhat Mankuliyev, and most recently 2 bloggers, Abdullah Urusov and Alisher Sahatov. While the last 2 were holding the CEO and refugee protection status, despite that fact, we believe that they were deported to Turkmenistan, and once again their whereabouts are unknown. In fact, in case of Farhat Mankuliyev, there are credible rumors, if such term exists at all, that he didn't even make it to the prison, that he was simply killed. Turkmenistan government does not report to the public about such things. In 2019-2020, several events slash things pushed for the emergence of Turkmen civil society, mainly abroad, and those events were, first of all, COVID, and the fact that the Turkmen government was completely denying its existence. We are still at 0 cases officially, despite the fact that tens of thousands of people have died because of it, even from top government layers. Another event was acute food crisis during that period, and government's complete inaction to do something about it. Finally, in April of 2020, we had a devastating hurricane that hit 2 out of 5 regions in Turkmenistan, leaving thousands of households without roofs on their homes. And so the government's reaction, in fact, the absence of any reaction triggered that emergence of civil society. And so those 5 gentlemen from Turkey, they were the most active critics of the regime. They would use social media, TikTok, YouTube. Well, it started with YouTube, then went into TikTok, very popular platform in Turkmenistan, by the way, even though it's blocked. People still find ways to access it by using VPNs. So they were criticizing the government for doing all this, and since 2023 up until the last 2 cases, one by one these people were sent back to Turkmenistan. We believe they are in prison. Another case, at least two activists from Russia that were also extradited to Turkmenistan, Melikirdi, Allah Muratov, and most recently, and this name is actually not known to public, we will publish about it soon, a young man named Saddam Kerimov also ended up in Turkmenistan and also in prison. Last year I was deported from Turkey. The Turkish government thought that I pose a threat to their national security. I was going to Antalya with my family for vacation. My family crossed the border and I couldn't. I was interrogated for 4 hours until the security services escorted me back to the plane, on the plane to the Netherlands where I live, and they put me on the plane and I left. I'm thankful to my Dutch passport that I was sent back to the Netherlands, otherwise I could have easily been sent back to Turkmenistan. In fact, this cooperation between Turkey and Turkmenistan is very alarming, and we believe the same type of agreement has been reached between Turkmenistan and virtually all other countries of the former Soviet Union, but especially all countries in Central Asia. That's why after the Turkish experience, my personal experience, I don't even want to try traveling to places like Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan or Uzbekistan, because there is a huge risk that instead of ending up back in the Netherlands, I would end up somewhere in Ashgabat. And yeah, you won't see me again. This is in general about political prisoners. We still have many people in custody from the period of the rule of this man, one of the most recent cases is activist Murat Dushemov. On the 16th of September, he was given additional 8 years in prison. He was already in prison. He was serving his 4-year term, and just several days prior to his release, inside the camp, they staged a fight between him and some other prisoner, and so he accused him of attacking, breaking his hand, whatever, and on the 16th of September, he was given another 8 years. His family is desperate. They don't know what to do, whom to address. People in such situation, and we have covered it many times, they turn to the prosecutor's office, they turn to courts, they turn to the ombudsman's office, but all in vain. One last resort is physically going to the presidential palace, trying to, get the attention of the president, but as soon as families or family members, individual family members reach the palace, they are taken away by the police and sent back to their regions, to the places where they came from. Nurgildi Khalikov, my correspondent, served 4 years in prison. Last year in June he was released, and despite there is no legal basis for the government to keep him in the country, they're not letting him travel. They're not letting him travel overseas. In February this year, he tried to leave to Dubai on a working visa, but they didn't let him go. Now he's suing the immigration authorities of Turkmenistan, and the court the first court has taken the side of the migration service, and now he's continuing his fight. Finally, activist Mansur Mingilov is still in prison, who was given 22 years in custody back in 2012. An innocent man, very sick. He has tuberculosis, bone tuberculosis, and with that sickness he should be released pre-term. That's what the law says. That's what the internal, regulations and things and protocols say, and the government knows it. Yet they are not letting him go.
Thank you, Ruslan, and we will stay in Central Asia to cover actually Tajikistan, and Marius Fosso is our next speaker from the Norwegian Helsinki committee, who is actually a regional representative in Central Asia, based exactly in Almaty, Kazakhstan. So, Marius, could you talk a little bit about the situation of political imprisonment in Tajikistan?
Thank you, Anna, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Marius Fossum. I'm the representative of Norwegian Helsinki Committee in Central Asia, where we've been working very closely on the Tajik human rights crisis for many, many years. For those of you who have seen the flyer, you will see Mr. Buzurgner Yoro here featured on the left. Yoro is a tragic symbol of the brutal crackdown in Tajikistan since 2013, and he has now already spent 10 years in prison for his crime of fulfilling his role as a defense lawyer. 10 years ago now, in 2015, the Tajik authorities revealed their fully authoritarian core when they launched an unprecedented crackdown on the peaceful opposition, any and all dissent, and basically all fundamental freedoms. That year, in 2015, and during the next year, we saw the first wave of mass arrests and subsequent imprisonments in Tajikistan, targeting mainly opposition members, peaceful opposition members and their supporters, in what we understand as a move to clear the political field in Tajikistan ahead of the 2016 referendum on changes to the constitution, which removed all term limits for President Emomali Rahman. Buzurgner Yoro was arrested that year in 2015, as I mentioned, 10 years ago, just last month, not for any criminal act, but in retaliation for serving as legal counsel, for being defense lawyer for opposition members that had been arrested in Tajikistan just weeks and months before his own detention. Shockingly, probably, he is neither the first nor the last lawyer in Tajikistan to be imprisoned, but his case stands out due to the combined 20-year sentence he has been given, based on a wide variety of bogus charges on fraud, extremism, forgery, incitement to national discord, and so on. And with his current sentence, Yoro will remain in prison until 2043. I could have stopped here, and this is all shocking enough. I will speak a little more because Yoro is just one of a very large number of political prisoners in Tajikistan. Unfortunately, nobody knows exactly how many there are. We at the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, with good help from good friends, have documented 550-something political prisoners. A list we will very soon publish, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. Gathering information and verifying information is extremely difficult. Relatives and victims are intimidated and are afraid to talk to us, for a good reason, I might add as well. People are routinely imprisoned for much less than speaking out about political imprisonment in Tajikistan. And the regime has just been imprisoning so many people during several waves of mass arrests that nobody can keep track. I mentioned already the first wave of mass arrests in 2015. The second wave took place ahead of the 2020 presidential elections, when President Emomali Rahmon was re-elected. Then we saw a third wave of mass arrests in 2022 and onwards, when the regime cracked down in the autonomous Gorno-Badakhshan region. As I said, we don't know how many political prisoners there are in Tajik prisons, but we can look for some hints if we look to the numbers that have been released by official sources. Just last month, if I remember correctly, or the month before, Russian authorities reported that they have detained 400 Tajik citizens during the first 8 months of this year at Tajikistan's request. That's an average of 50 per month. Most of these are likely due to face deportation and persecution in Tajikistan on dubious charges. Additionally, the Tajik authorities have reported 593 terrorism cases in the first half of this year, with 411 suspects identified and 241 detained already. Last year, 365 individuals were detained for supposed ties to or support to illegal groups. And unlike in Turkey, which has been mentioned, the acquittal rates in Tajikistan are practically zero. Of course, you can't say that all these hundreds of cases involve political prisoners, but what these numbers do is they tell us something about the rapid rate with which the Tajik authorities are detaining and imprisoning its own people. And they hint at a much, much larger number of political prisoners, especially since it's very difficult to believe that Tajik authorities stopped nearly 600 terrorism plots during the first half of this year. And especially since we know that charges of terrorism, extremism, and support for illegal groups are routinely weaponized to silence dissent and imprison critics. Particularly those that have anything to do with groups that are now banned in Tajikistan. We also know, since the regime announced it itself in May this year, that 1,500 individuals have been imprisoned since 2018, merely for liking or otherwise engaging with social media content. This spring, President Rahmon signed amendments to the criminal code purportedly to decriminalize this practice, but all of this lacks any credibility until Tajikistan takes steps to immediately release all the 1,500 imprisoned for social media engagement and to rehabilitate them before the law and ensure compensation. I understand I'm going over time now. So the last thing I'll say is, as long as Tajikistan keeps political prisoners in the many hundreds, we need Magnitsky-style sanctions. Thank you.
Thank you, Marius. I know you could add way more to describe this grim situation, but we have to move to our last speaker, last but not least, and this is Berit Lindemann, Secretary General of the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, who is going to talk to us actually what international organizations can do to address the issue of political prisoners. It's not a new question for sure. And what to do with those who have been recently released and perhaps need some sort of rehabilitation and help. So Berit, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I will start to say a few words about Belarus because I'm going to use Belarus as a case because Belarus is one of the places where actually there have been some efforts to ameliorate or to negotiate and to do something. Well, so 3 years ago, exactly today, it was announced that Ales Bielacki was laureate of the Nobel Peace Prize. we rejoiced and we thought this would mean his release. But until today, he's still in jail. He's one of currently 1,200 political prisoners at least. Since 2020, 10,000 have been incarcerated on shorter and longer terms. Many have been criminally convicted on extremism and terrorism, meaning that they also risk and receive horrible conditions in prison isolation, lack of medical help, mistreatment, and torture. And several, at least 9, have died in prison since 2021, and the last one died just 4 weeks ago, and that was a relatively young man of 36. The risk cause of death is not clear, but his mother said that she was at least had some comfort, and that was he was no longer being tortured. So that's the grim background. Again, there's a lot of grim stories here. I would like to talk about some of the things that have been done for Belarus. There have been sanctions on Belarus for 15 years, on and off, and there's sanctions on individuals, so-called Magnitsky sanctions imposed against people engaged in torture, judges, security forces, and so on. There are sanctions against companies and resources inside that are to the advantage of the regime. So a lot of businesses and industries have been sanctioned. And they're also being sanctioned with the same sanctions as Russia because of their engagement with Russia and on the war in Ukraine. Now, one thing that's where we come in, because there's a fund for political prisoners in Belarus, which was initiated by Tikhanovskaya, the opposition leader or the elected president in Belarus. It has actually been provided with more than 2,000. We have a lot of money. I just need to find the number here. 2,900,000 euro currently from Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Spain to provide support for political prisoners inside of Belarus and those who have been released and victims of other kind of repression. It has been administered by us, but implemented by Belarusian organizations. So it is to provide support that is needed. And here there are really some horrible stories that we have seen when people are being released. The needs are, after the release, there have, for instance, now been 52 releases. Approximately 35 of them have come to Poland and Lithuania, and they need clothes, cash, mobile phone, they need a place to live, they need documents, mobile phones, they need to be treated for all their health issues, general bad health, they have suffered bad food, they have teeth that need massive replacement. They suffer from PTSD. Long-term psychological support is needed. They need jobs. They need someone to accompany them because they are so traumatized that even simple things can be hard to manage. And I'm saying this, and the fund is able to support some of it, not all of it, but some of this. I also think it's important to say this because this is not because of the needs of the Belarusian political prisoners are particular. These are the needs of all the political prisoners. So I think the fund is a good example of what the international community can do. And it raises the attention to the political prisoners, and it raises attention to our responsibility to be with the political prisoners while they are inside, but also afterwards, because their destiny is really terrible. And if anyone needs more information about this, I'm available.
Thank you so much, Berit. It's good to end with actually a positive note, at least when it comes to the panel. And thank you very much for the live streaming. We came to the end of a recording, so right now we have very informal.